What would you do if you were the only one who could stop a slaughter? On the deck of the USS Hornet, the 12th of September 1944, the air thrums with the power of a fleet about to act, metal singing, pilots shouting, steam and salt, and the sharp smell of avgas. Dawn cuts through haze in thin, cold blades. Crews move with practiced urgency. Straps snapped, radios checked, catapults armed. Orders ripple like a current, and every man knows his place. But under the routine, a question hangs: one simple flight, one pilot, one decision that could mean the difference between chaos and survival. Among the noise, a lone figure straps into a Hellcat. Amid the controlled chaos, Major Robert Cowboy Stout eases into the cramped cockpit of his F-6F Hellcat, the carrier's deck vibrating beneath him. He runs practiced fingers over switches, slides his leather gloves on, fastens the harness, clamps the oxygen mask, and eyes the horizon. Years of missions have made this almost ritual calm, precise, ready. But beneath that calm is a cold, watchful edge. Today, every breath will count. On paper, it's sleepy, just a simple photo recon over Peleliu, a milk run to tick off the map and go home. But in the cockpit, everything has a weight to it. The camera tucked under the wing, sunlight slicing the canopy, and the quiet insistence of a mission that expects nothing out of the ordinary. Major Robert Cowboy Stout goes through the motions anyway, smooth and practiced, because routine keeps men alive. Still, trained eyes never relax. He keeps the Hellcat level, watches the island grow in the windscreen, and lets the hush of a supposedly abandoned airfield sharpen every sense. On paper, it was laughably simple. Intelligence said Peleliu's airfields were empty, so Stout's job was banal: fly over, snap the photos, radio back, and come home. It was the kind of mission you did between bad ones, the milk run every carrier pilot joked about while checking his guns. He filed the plan, strapped in, reviewed his camera settings, and let the briefing lull him into a careful complacency. Routine breeds confidence. Routine saves lives. Routine, but also, as any veteran knows, can be the quietest trap of all. With that in his bones, he eased his Hellcat toward the island at dawn. At the catapult's roar, Stout's Hellcat rips off the deck and claws into the dawn. G-forces pin him to leather as the carrier shrinks beneath a haze of exhaust and sea spray. The American fleet falls back as a line of gray hulks, distant and vulnerable. He peels away, punching for altitude, eyes fixed on the faint, distant island ahead where the real fight will begin. As Peleliu slid up out of the morning haze, the island unfolded beneath him like a stage set, runways cut clean into the coral, maintenance sheds spaced in obedient rows, the whole place exactly as the briefing had said, empty. It should have made him relax. It didn't. Silence pressed against the cockpit glass, no taxiing, no distant engines, not even birds kicking up from the berms, just an unnerving stillness that felt staged. Something in the geometry of shadows, the too perfect alignment of shapes, pulled at the back of his neck. Stout tightened his grip. Recon or not, his instincts told him to look closer. Stout eases his Hellcat down for the photo run, the morning haze sharpening into iron edges beneath the canopy. And at first, everything matches the briefing runway lines, scattered vehicles, and aching, brittle quiet. Then the cockpit narrows, a detail snaps into place, and the air goes cold. His heart tightens. Faces of boys on the transports flicker through his mind. The quiet is wrong. The pattern is wrong. There's movement where there should be abandonment. For a second, he simply watches. Every training instinct screaming at him, this isn't reconnaissance. This is preparation. The airfield isn't empty. It's a trap. Hidden under a mottled camouflage net, They sprawled out below him like some terrible, orderly parade, dozens of Japanese bombers and fighters parked wingtip to wingtip, gleaming metal and folded wings packed in perfect, vulnerable rows. From up here they looked absurdly fragile, a forest of silver lined up against the sky, every tank and bomb already lashed and waiting. The neat geometry wasn't the work of discipline. It was the enemy's fatal mistake: concentration instead of dispersal. Arrogance turned into a single, combustible target. For a moment the airfield was only a picture. Then he understood what that picture meant. It wasn't empty. It was a staging ground. On the ground, crews moved like ants, hands a blur as they shoved bombs into cradles, lash straps, and torque detonators into place. Men crawl over wings, topping off tanks with a steady hiss. Fuel drums clang like metronomes. Everything is practiced, efficient, urgent. There's no hesitation, only the grim choreography of a force about to take off. It looks routine. It looks ready. It looks dangerous, poised to unleash hell. The sight hits him like a punch to the gut. Those neat rows of planes aren't meant for training. They're lined up and waiting, aimed at the thin, defenseless line of transport ships just over the horizon. He can see them tiny hulls and crowded decks, the vulnerable men who will be boarding in a few hours, and the arithmetic is brutal. One coordinated launch from this field would turn the invasion beaches into a furnace. Protocol says report and wait. Instinct says there isn't time. For a breathless second, he does the only thing left to do. He lets the memory of past firestorms rise up, and the faces of the boys on those decks fill his mind. The memory hits him like the taste of smoke decks sheened with oil, men clinging to splintered rails, faces turned to flame before they ever set foot ashore, black columns of smoke rising over shattered transports, the hollow thud of survivors' boots on charred wood, the sudden awful silence where shouting used to be. This isn't a briefing figure or a map annotation. It's a roomful of ruined lives that keeps replaying. Buddies who never got a chance, kids trained and ready who never fired a shot. If he does nothing, thousands of Marines will die. He can feel that truth down to his bones. His training screams at him: break off, maintain radio silence, fly back, report, wait for a full strike package, do it by the book, and you keep pilots and plans alive. Protocol is a lifeline. It's discipline braided into muscle memory. But discipline lives alongside memory, and the burned faces and smoldering hulks from earlier raids flicker through his mind. Waiting means watching those ships become targets. Waiting means thousands of Marines climbing into a storm. The math is ugly and immediate. Orders would buy safety for the many at the cost of time the many do not have. His hands tighten on the stick. His gut says otherwise. His training is shouting the right answer: radio silence, back to the carrier, run the report, let the escorts do their job. But something colder and older than instruction tightens in his chest. Years of combat have taught him to read the clock on a battlefield, to recognize when minutes are not minutes but a countdown. He looks down and sees how the enemy is stacked like kindling, how a delay will turn preparation into a launch pad. Protocol is clean and safe on paper. Real life is messy and fast. There isn't time to wait for permission. If he hesitates, thousands die. If he followed procedure, he'd turn, go home, file his report, and wait for the carriers to pull together a strike package: radios, briefings, planes fueled and armed. That takes hours. Hours on a clock that, right now, is counting down towards slaughter. By the time help could arrive, those camouflaged bombers would be climbing into the sunrise and pouring fire onto the transports beyond the horizon. He can almost hear the waves and the screams. The math is brutally simple. Slow equals death. So the decision tightens around him like a vice. There isn't time to be right, only to act. His eyes sweep the field again, slower this time, hunting for whatever nagged at him, a pattern, a gap, a mistake. Then the answer snaps into focus like a shutter. It isn't chaos down there at all, but careless order, a confidence so complete it blindfolds them. For a moment he just stares, the world narrowing to that one terrible realization. This is no dispersed, hardened defense. It's a single vulnerability waiting to be exploited. The weight of it hits him like a punch to the gut. He knows what it means. He knows what he could do. The chance is blatant. Stout's eyes swept the field and froze. Planes, dozens of them, sat in perfect, arrogant rows, wingtip to wingtip, no room to breathe. Worse, they were parked feet from towering stacks of steel fuel drums, the drums gleaming in the sun like kindling. In a single heartbeat, the picture snapped into cruel clarity. This wasn't an abandoned strip, it was a fuse. The Japanese hadn't dispersed their force. They'd concentrated it, clustering their lifeblood and their weapons together. Their whole air arm had become one massive tinderbox. To a trained pilot, that wasn't merely a vulnerability, it was a choice he could make. Then, like a crack in the gray, the enemy's arrogance reveals itself, neat rows of aircraft parked cheek to cheek, right beside stacks of fuel drums. One clean pass, one line of incendiary rounds through those drums, and the whole air wing could become a single uncontrollable furnace. It's audacious. It's against every rule he learned. But it's also the only thing that stands between thousands of Marines and a slaughter. Protocol says radio for a strike. Combat sense says, act now. His hands tighten on the stick. The chance is razor thin, but real, and it changes everything. He is one pilot with 6 machine guns against an entire airbase. Doctrine screams suicide protocol. Prudence, the slow, proper response. But doctrine was written for theory, not this smoke-thick instant. What is one life against thousands? He sees the faces, the new, nervous eyes of Marines crammed on the transports, pale hands gripping rails, letters in their pockets. He hears echoes of other decks, screams, heat, metal, and men lost before they could fight. His throat tightens. Training tells him to fall back. Fear says retreat. Something colder, harder rises. A calculus of lives owed. For a heartbeat, the math is clear, and his hand finds the throttle. He weighs the direct orders like a cold ledger. Follow protocol, report back, wait for backup against a far uglier accounting. Hundreds of tiny faces on crowded decks, boys who haven't seen a sunrise, ships that would burn before reinforcements could form up. Training whispers the safe answer. Something older and louder in him answers with the shape of the coming slaughter. Time is the enemy. Procedure is a luxury they don't have. The calculus is brutal and simple. His life versus thousands. He pictures the Marines' eager, trusting faces again, and the math collapses. The choice sharpens into certainty. There is no choice. Decision made. Stout slammed the throttle forward until the Hellcat answered with a howl, the engine spitting fury into the morning. The deck fell away beneath him as he banked hard, the world compressing into the aluminum sight ahead. This was no longer a quiet recon run. He flipped the switch from observer to hunter, every checklist forgotten in the grit of a single brutal impulse. Stop them now or watch thousands die. Fingers white on the stick, jaw set, he drove the nose toward the earth and dove fast, low, and utterly committed, knowing there was no turning back. He throws the Hellcat into a knife-edge dive, falling in low to slip beneath radar. Wind screams past the canopy. The runway explodes toward him, rows of planes, crews, fuel drums, every target a heartbeat. The world narrows to the gun sight. He tucks his chin, picks a lane between gun pits, and breathes out, ready to burn it down. Speed needles climb 310 miles per hour, Hellcat a blur. The wind screams, the cockpit vibrates, and everything else falls away until all that exists is the tiny iron crosshair ahead. Time compresses, breathing slows, decisions live in fractions of a second. He is a guided bullet with a single mission: tear the tinderbox open. He ignores individual planes. Instead, he locks onto the real target, the first neat row of bombers, parked wingtip to wingtip beside a massive stack of fuel drums. It isn't courage so much as cold calculus. Strike that tinderbox and the rest will go up by itself. Time compresses. The gun sight eats the runway, and he prepares to make a single, decisive pass. Everything narrows to a single line of sight. The first row of bombers and the towering stack of fuel drums beyond them, and Stout's world tightens to the gun sight glass and the faint vibration under his palms. Instruments blur, wind screams past. The Hellcat is a razor on the air as his thumb hovers over the red trigger on the control stick, every instinct arguing caution, while a harder, colder thought clenches his jaw. If he doesn't act now, ships full of boys will burn. Time thins to a hair. He holds his breath, poised between protocol and the only choice that matters. He presses the trigger. The Hellcat shudders as all 6 .50 caliber machine guns erupt in a torrent of fire. Muzzle flashes strobe the cockpit, the nose rearing with each thunderous kick. The world narrows to the gun sight, and the streaking tracers' metal ropes cutting toward the clustered planes below. Stout tastes the heat, feels the recoil in his bones, every breath a measured beat. The odor of burned powder fills the cockpit. Rounds bite into thin aluminum and into the fuel drums he'd lined up, and in that instant, the tiny bullets carry the promise of a very big explosion. A stream of armor-piercing incendiary rounds lances across the airfield, rat-a-tat from 6 barrels, each bullet built to bite through metal and ignite fuel. Tracer ribbons stitch the sky. Sparks spray like tiny suns as drums and aircraft skin erupt in pinprick fires, turning the runway into a bleeding mesh of orange and smoke. There's no time to think, only to keep flying. The 6 guns rake the fuel drums. Thin metal screams and peels away under a hail of AP incendiary rounds. Fuel doesn't trickle. It detonates a geyser of fire and shrapnel that wipes out the first row of aircraft in an instant. Heat slams into the Hellcat. Stout feels the blast press against his fuselage as the airfield erupts. A colossal fireball blossoms before him, strangely silent against the morning sky, then floods everything with a brutal wash of heat and light. For a heartbeat, the world goes white and raw. The nearest bombers lined up like sitting ducks are swallowed whole. Sheet metal bowing, fuel tanks rupturing, flames licking through cockpits and wing roots. Flaming debris stabs upward, a raining scatter of burning metal. On the ground, men become shadows, thrown back by the blast and blinded by the glare. His Hellcat trembles in his hands as the concussion rolls past. There is no mistaking the scale of what he just unleashed. A devastating chain reaction begins. The bombers don't fade, they detonate. The first aircraft tears itself apart in a flash, its flaming debris slamming into the fully fueled plane beside it and lighting it like kindling. Burning fuel lashes out across wings and rows, each blast triggering another, until a single strike blooms into a chain of eruptions, swallowing the airfield. Wing tanks, superheated by the inferno, burst like bombs, spraying burning fuel across the remaining aircraft in the row. Sheets of flame licked fuselages, fuel-soaked wings ignited instantly. In seconds, a chain of violent detonations raced down the line, metal folding, tires exploding, wingtip fuel tanks cooking off, turning disciplined rows of warplanes into a rolling, roaring pyre that fed itself as it went. The neat rows of deadly warplanes become a cascading funeral pyre. Fires lick from wing to wing, a yellow, hungry line that eats metal and fabric in seconds. Tanks rupture, bombs cook off, and entire fuselages blossom into columns of flame. One detonation sets the next ablaze, sympathetic explosions folding the field into a single, convulsing inferno, hurling molten shrapnel and black smoke high enough to blot the sun. Stout roared past the first line of destruction he'd created. The shockwave from the detonations rattled his Hellcat like a fist on the fuselage. Heat and flying metal streaked by in orange ribbons. Instruments hopped on their mounts. For a heartbeat, he felt every blast in his teeth, every rivet shiver. He didn't look for applause. He scanned ahead, smoke curling, runway turned furnace, already calculating his next strike as the island below dissolved into frantic motion. The island unravels beneath him. What was orderly a heartbeat ago becomes pure panic as the first explosions rip through parked planes. Ground crews spill out of shelters, shoving equipment aside, dropping cameras and wrenches as they sprint. Fuel hoses snake across scorched tarmac, trucks jackknife, men on fire roll and crawl, and a roar of terrified shouting mixes with distant booms. Debris skitters like angry metal, and for a wild, suspended second, there is no drill to follow, only survival. Organization collapses into running feet, and dumb terror confusion so complete that anti-aircraft crews, frantic and disoriented, start firing blindly into the choking smoke. Confusion on the ground morphs into frantic, indiscriminate gunfire. Japanese anti-aircraft crews, blinded by the thick black smoke, sweep the sky with everything they have, tracers stitching the haze into a deadly lattice. Bursts blossom into shockwaves that tear at the runway and hurl debris skyward. Nobody can see the attacker. Everyone fires. The air fills with screaming metal and flash, and that blind barrage is already angling toward a lone, streaking Hellcat. Stout banked hard, taking the flak on his tail and treating every burst like a ticking clock. Adrenaline honed his instincts, and he ran the numbers rounds left, angle of attack, likely chain reactions. He couldn't waste tracers or sloppy bursts. Every shot had to spark a chain, not just nick paint. He hunted for the one weakness that would turn chaos into catastrophe for the enemy. What's his next target? He spots it. A fuel-heavy torpedo bomber parked nose out, tanks full. A torpedo slung beneath like a barrel of dynamite, perfectly placed to turn this airfield into an inferno. The math is ugly and simple. Hit that plane, and everything around it goes up. Stout tightens his grip, breathes, and lines the Hellcat in for the decisive pass. He settles the bomber in his gun sight, breath shallow, hands steady. At 280 miles per hour, he squeezes the trigger and stitches a white-hot seam of tracer down the bomber's fuselage. Bullets tear through thin skin, rip fuel lines, and spark a flare of orange. The plane shudders, flames licking its belly. Below, men scatter as the torpedo bomber becomes an accelerating fuse. The torpedo bomber detonates in a monstrous bloom of fire, a concussive shock that flips dirt and hurls burning metal skyward. A spray of jagged shrapnel rakes the ramp wing spars, fuel lines, sheet metal cutting through crews and aircraft alike. Men are thrown, alarms wail, fires leap. Flying fragments carve through the next row of planes, turning them into fuel-fed tinder. Shrapnel rips through the parked formation, turning sheet metal into confetti. Fuel lines are severed, geysers of gasoline hissing across the tarmac. Sparks meet that slick in an instant, flame snakes along the rows. Planes designed to kill become kindling. The field erupts forward of him, fast, brutal, irreversible, and the inferno spreads like a living thing. The entire northern section of the airbase is now an uncontrollable inferno, a storm of fire, smoke, and secondary explosions. Planes disintegrate into molten steel, black smoke blossoms into the sky, burning wreckage rains down. Ground crews scatter, silhouettes swallowed by flame and ash. Anti-aircraft guns blaze blindly through the smoke. For a few terrible moments, the field is nothing but noise and heat. His first pass was a stunning success, but he doesn't allow himself a second of relief. The fires he started roar behind him, lighting the sky, and through the choking black smoke, something still moves. The southern end of the field is active. Vehicles rolling, men shouting, engines coughing to life beneath tarpaulins. For a heartbeat, he lets the scale of what he's done wash over him. Then he narrows his focus. This isn't about glory. It's about finishing the job. He banks, eyes the remaining targets, and recalibrates one more run, one more chance to make sure none of those planes ever lift off. For a breath, triumph turns brittle. The smoke hides more than success now. Alarms tear the air apart, and the island snaps awake. What was a smoking surprise becomes 100 barrels of steel, swiveled toward one tiny speck of aluminum. Anti-aircraft nests crane, crews shout, tracers stitch the sky. He's a single silhouette against a ring of guns, every battery converging, every eye tracking his shadow. The math is brutal and immediate. One plane, countless barrels, no backup. The moment of advantage is gone. Now it's down to skill, nerve, and a single impossible second pass. The first pass bought him minutes, but not mercy. The island is alert now, smoke and shouting replacing surprise. He can't throw lead wildly and hope for miracles. This run demands surgical thinking. Stout eases the throttle, trading raw speed for accuracy, settling the Hellcat at about 280 miles per hour. Slower means steadier sights, tighter bursts, every round weighted with consequence. It also makes him a prettier target. He feels the plane settle under his hands, counts the remaining belts in his head, breathes to steady the aim, and lines up the next strike with a calm only combat can teach. He bleeds off speed, trading agility for aim 280 miles per hour. Every shot must count. Slowing down makes him an easier target, a gamble he accepts. The sky around his cockpit snaps to life with orange streaks as enemy gunners find their range. Tracers lace the air. For a heartbeat, everything narrows to the hellish lattice of fire and his next move. A curtain of fire erupts ahead, tracers stitching the sky into a bright, deadly lattice. His Hellcat answers with coughing alarms. A hot sting rakes the fuselage. He's wounded and outgunned, every instinct shouting to peel away. But the invasion hangs in the balance. He breathes, jams the stick forward, and drives straight into the heart of the blaze. Can he finish the job? He weaves through a deadly lattice of flak and tracer fire, every explosion a hot breath against the skin of his plane. Training clicks into place, muscle memory routing fear into practiced movement, his hands and feet moving before thought. He threads tight, precise turns, keeps the nose steady, counts his ammo, and through the haze he spots his next target. He spots his next target, a cluster of Zeros, fragile and fast, being shoved on trolleys toward the jungle line. Ground crews hustle, silhouettes against the smoke, trying to hide them in the trees. If they get under the canopy, they'll vanish and launch later. Stout's jaw tightens, no time to watch them disappear. He noses the Hellcat downward, lining up the fleeting opportunity. He fires a short, controlled burst 50 caliber guns, spitting tracers and lead, tearing through the Zero's thin skin. Wings and fabric blossom into flame. Pilots never make it to the tree line. Planes cartwheel and slam into the brush. In seconds, the neat scramble is scattered wreckage, and he watches the ammo counters blink stubbornly toward empty. The ammo counters on the instrument panel blink low, tiny red numbers coughing at him like a clock winding down. He stares, does the math in a breath. 2 short bursts left, maybe 3 passes at most, no room for waste. Every shot now has to be surgical. He thumbs the guns live, steels himself, lines up the next target, then the sky answers. Suddenly, a hard thud slams into the rear of his Hellcat. The fuselage jerks, metal sings, the tail vibrates under his feet. For a heartbeat, the world narrows to a single, horrible sound and a thin, red warning light blooming on the panel. Instruments twitch, fuel pressure drops. Smoke stings the back of his throat, but the plane holds together, stubborn and noisy. Adrenaline locks his hands to the stick. He tastes copper and grit, and the decision he already made, no turning back, settles like a stone. Damage or no damage, there's one thing left to do: finish what he started. Despite the warning lights strobing in his peripheral vision, Stout forced them out of his head and scanned the smoking chaos below for one last high-value target. Instruments blinked. The Hellcat trembled. He let training take over eyes, cutting the field like a blade searching for the single strike that would make everything count. No hesitation, no mercy. He sees it, a low, camouflaged shelter hunched against the tree line, canvas peeled back to reveal 2 dive bombers being hustled into a hurried takeoff. Men swarm the planes, straps tighten, bombs roll on rattling trolleys, fuel lines are clipped into belly tanks, a mechanic is cranking a prop while another yells over the din. Everything moves fast, too fast. These 2 could be airborne in minutes and turn the whole operation into a slaughter. Stout feels the window closing like a trapdoor. He squares his shoulders, lines up his run, and commits. He pushes the stick, dives one last time, hard and low, canopy wind screaming as the island fills the windscreen. Smoke and fire streak across the runway. But in the lee of a camouflaged shelter, 2 dive bombers crouch like coiled beasts. He drives the Hellcat down the glide, squares his shoulders to the gun sight, steadies the crosshair between rafters and shadow, and holds his breath. This pass will decide everything. He fires the last rounds into the shelter, short, brutal bursts, until the ammunition belts click empty. The 6 guns fall silent with a final, hollow, metallic cough. For a heartbeat, there is only the thump of his own heart and the wind rushing past the canopy. He hangs there, momentarily exposed and spent, watching through a film of smoke to see if his final shots did the job. It happened instantly. A last, desperate burst spat through the shelter, and 1 bomber, caught like kindling a tongue of orange, licked the fuselage and climbed into the wing tanks. The second bird didn't explode, it bled. A seam in its belly split, and fuel began to run, dark and oily, pooling and seeping across the concrete. The spill crawled toward the flames with cruel inevitability, thin rivulets connecting the 2 metal coffins. There was no time to think. The shelter filled with the smell of hot oil and the promise of a far bigger blast. The leaking fuel snakes across the shelter floor, seeking the smallest spark. It finds the flames licking at the first bomber, and like a living thing, connects them, a river of fire pouring between metal and canvas. Heat blossoms instantly, orange and white, swallowing shadow and sound, turning the shelter into a single, roaring pyre poised on the edge of annihilation. Both bombers vanish in a final concussive blast that rips their shelter into splinters. Heat and flying metal flash past his tail, and for a heartbeat, the world is only light and noise, then black smoke and ash. His ammunition is gone, the belts run dry, and the guns click empty and the instrument panel blooms with angry red lights as the Hellcat shudders from the hits it took. He feels the plane breathe wrong under his hands, oil slicking something vital, and realizes, with a cold clarity, he's alone, deep in enemy territory, wounded, and the only thing between him and the sea is the skill he can still summon. He skirts a smoldering fuel truck, palms tight on the stick. On reflex, out of spite, out of something raw and stubborn, he squeezes the trigger, only to hear the hollow, empty click of spent guns. For a beat he lets that sound hang, a small, bitter punctuation to the inferno below, then forces himself to climb away. Now it's all about surviving the trip home. Mission complete. The guns are empty, the airfield a smoldering ruin below. All that's left is the long, fragile ride back, a wounded Hellcat, a lone pilot, and the thin thread of luck that will carry him home. Stout yanks back hard on the stick, and the battered Hellcat begrudgingly climbs, coughing smoke from a wounded cowling as alarms flicker on the panel. Every control feels heavier, every bump a reminder of the punishment it took below. He cranes his neck, chest tight, but keeps his eyes forward. He needs altitude more than celebration. The sky around him is a bruise. The island is a distant, rolling inferno he just left in pieces. He nurses the wounded fighter, breath measured, hands steady, preparing for that first look over his shoulder to see if his desperate gamble worked. He drags the damaged Hellcat up and, almost without thinking, looks back over his shoulder, and the view knocks the breath out of him. The island has turned into a black column tearing at the morning sky, flames knifing through rows of metal, wings reduced to glowing skeletons. Pockets of fire belch and bloom where fuel and ordnance have gone off, little suns of destruction dotting the field. For a long second, all he hears is the drone of his engine and the clatter of cooling panels, while relief and a hollow ache trade places in his chest. As he climbs, Stout looks back. Peleliu Airfield is a single, writhing wound, completely engulfed, a massive column of greasy black smoke mushrooming into the sky, visible for miles. The sun catches in the blaze, turning fire into a distant, angry star. Below, the ground is a broken lattice of twisted metal and burning fuel, flashes of orange and white mark where planes are still cooking off. The sound reaches him even now, dull, far-off concussions, the sick rhythm of ammunition and fuel dying. For a moment, he simply can't take his eyes off it. He knows, with a cold, simple clarity, what he has done. He looks back and counts the pyres, one ragged column after another, and the math lands like a fresh blow. In 2 furious passes, minutes, not hours, he's torn the island's air force to pieces. Nearly 40 planes, 40 machines of war reduced to smoke and twisted metal in the time it takes to breathe. Relief comes, sharp and immediate, braided with a cold, hollow fatigue. He never wanted glory. He wanted the ships to live. The sight is awful and pure. Black pillars climbing into a sky that, for the invasion below, suddenly feels eerily, miraculously quiet. He lets himself hope for the first time. In 2 breathless passes, in a handful of minutes, one man did what entire strike wings might have failed to do. He wiped out the Japanese air threat in that sector. Nearly 40 planes reduced to burning metal, fuel and wings turned into a single, roaring inferno. An enemy air force rendered useless, not by numbers, but by one hard-headed decision and 6 guns. It was a tiny, impossible thing that changed an invasion's odds. The sky over the beaches would be clear. The Marines below would step into a fight without the rain of planes that should have been waiting for them. The skies over the invasion beaches would be clear. The Marines would be safe from the air. For a handful of minutes, a single Hellcat had turned the balance, blazing through neatly stacked rows of death and trading one life for thousands. There was no fanfare up here, only the afterimage of fire and the sick, metallic taste of adrenaline. He knew the numbers mattered, but what stayed with him was quieter. The thought of landing craft, splashing ashore without the sky raining death, of boys getting a chance to fight rather than burn. He had done it. His damaged Hellcat limps through the sky, trailing smoke as he nurses it back toward the fleet. Smoke stings the cockpit, gauges blink warnings, and every mile is measured in careful, tiny corrections. Trim here, a touch of rudder there to keep the wounded bird from falling apart. The roar of the engine is a stubborn heartbeat beneath his hands. Outside, the black column he left behind still curls upward. He feels the weight of everything he just did settle in his bones, but there is no time to dwell. One thought hums under everything: make the deck, land, and live to tell them why he broke the rules. His radio crackles to life as his Hellcat limps toward the fleet, urgent voices cutting through static. Pilot here, huge smoke column off Peleliu, visible for miles. One by one, other patrol planes confirm it, their tones tight with disbelief. The black plume on the horizon suddenly makes the scale of the destruction impossible to ignore. Back aboard the Hornet, the radio erupted, air controllers snapping into the net, their voices sharp with urgency, every word clipped and hard. "Report. What's happening at Peleliu? Identify yourself," they demanded. A staccato of questions pushed across the frequency as other pilots called in sight of a towering smoke column. Instruments and eyewitness reports tumbled together into one ugly truth. Procedures kicked in, voices overlapped. The flight deck held its breath, listening for an answer to explain that black plume rising from the island. The radio crackled to life, and the Hornet's controllers, voices sharp with urgency, were already demanding answers. Stout thumbed the mic, palms slick, his heart still racing from the dive, but when he spoke there was none of the raggedness he felt, just a practiced, steady calm that cut through static. "Hornet Control, this is Stout." In that short, measured line was every second of what he'd just done: speed, metal, fire, and the weight of a choice he couldn't undo, delivered plainly into a headset that now hung on the edge of understanding. He paused, drew a breath that tasted of smoke and adrenaline, and let it out slow. Then, calm and economical, he keyed the mic. Mission complete. Peleliu airfield neutralized. Returning to base, per. Those three clipped lines dropped into the headset like a verdict: clean, uncompromising, final. No flourish, no boasting. Just the matter-of-fact cadence of a man who had broken orders so others could live, and who, having done the impossible, was now simply reporting in. A stunned silence hangs on the radio frequency, only the thin hiss of static and the rumble of engines breaking the void. Then the Hornet's controller cuts through, voice tight and half disbelieving. "Say again, Stout? Did you say neutralized?" The words land like a stone. You can hear the carrier crew lean in over the wire, the impossible claim echoing through the metal corridors and up into the bridge. For a beat, everything holds its breath, waiting to see if one pilot's reckless act was fact or fever dream, while miles of ocean and hundreds of men quietly count on the answer. He let himself smile, small, weary, the kind that comes after holding your breath for too long, and for the first time since the dive, the knot of tension in his chest began to loosen. The Hellcat still coughed and rattled around him. Smoke streaked the horizon. His hands smelled of cordite and oil. He keyed the mic with a steady, tired voice that somehow sounded calmer than he felt. Affirmative. The airfield is no longer operational. Those words hung in the radio like a verdict, simple and absolute, and for a moment he allowed himself to believe the worst had been stopped. Months later, Stout stood again on a carrier deck, but this time the world wasn't asking for a reconnaissance report. It was handing him the Navy Cross, the Navy's second highest decoration for extraordinary heroism, and what the citation politely called a calculated defiance of orders. He let them pin it on. He nodded through the formalities. Reporters scribbled. Officers saluted. He kept his face quiet, eyes more on the Pacific than on the ribbon at his collar. The medal would be written into the record, a brief official sentence. What mattered to him, those thousands of Marines who would step ashore with clear skies, needed no ceremony. Even after the Navy Cross, he rarely spoke of the mission. In a culture of loud storytellers and swaggering deck pilots who traded tall tales like dog tags, Stout kept his counsel. His modesty felt almost like a rebuke. He didn't want the medal to become theater. He judged success by the men who lived to hit the beach, not by headlines or barroom glory. Sometimes he'd deflect a question with a dry joke. Sometimes he'd say nothing at all. That quiet became part of him, silent, stubborn, as remarkable as the courage that won the citation, and it followed him home into a life of work and family rather than fame. After the war, he slipped back into a quiet life in California, trading carrier decks for factory floors and dogfights for drafting tables. By day, he worked in the burgeoning aerospace industry, design reviews, test schedules, long hours under fluorescent lights. By night, he was simply a father and husband, fixing the lawnmower, coaching Little League, listening more than he spoke. He accepted promotions without fanfare and left medals in a drawer. His modesty matched the old pilot's legend. He didn't parade a hero's story. Instead, he built engines, bedtime routines, and a steady, ordinary home. So ordinary his children would grow up not knowing that September morning. At home, he was just Dad, the man who fixed the lawnmower, cheered at Little League, and showed up for birthdays. The medals gathered dust in a drawer. The story never became Sunday dinner conversation. When neighbors asked about the war, he changed the subject or shrugged it off with a quick joke. His children grew up with the calm, ordinary rhythms of suburban life and only the faintest, mysterious glimmers of something he wouldn't talk about: a photo tucked in a shoebox, a distant look at dusk. They loved him for the father they knew, not the storm he'd flown through that September morning over a forgotten island. For all the smoke and wreckage he left over play, Stout's action nearly vanished into the margins of history, reduced to a single bureaucratic line in after-action reports, a brief footnote buried among ship logs and casualty lists. The official record loved numbers and timelines, not the messy, rule-breaking courage of one pilot. A few sailors and a handful of officers remembered. Most did not. Years slid by. The story stayed quiet, passed in low voices rather than headlines. In the end, the real measure wasn't a paragraph in a report. It was the men who walked ashore because a lone Hellcat had changed the odds. His true legacy wasn't measured in medals or headlines. It lived in the small, decisive mercy of a single September morning, in the thousands of Marines who stepped off landing craft onto Peleliu and found the sky strangely, mercifully silent. That quiet made all the difference. Lives spared, chaos averted. A campaign that could have become a slaughter, instead steered by one reckless, clear-eyed choice. He went home to a modest life. His children grew up with a father who never made a show of glory. The real medal was the empty space over those beaches, proof that courage can save the living, not just win praise. In the quiet after the smoke cleared, Stout's true reward wasn't the Navy Cross or the clipped lines in an after-action report. It was the faces of the men who stepped onto those beaches and lived to see another dawn. He went home to a modest life, his children mostly unaware of that single, terrible morning, and his story nearly vanished into the margins of history. Yet one swift, impossible choice changed the odds for thousands. That's the strange arithmetic of courage. One small act, under impossible pressure, that rewrote countless futures. These are the quiet heroes. Their stories are waiting.